All right, so today we're diving deep into a book that's stuck with readers for generations, Lord of the Flies. We're going to dig into its origins, like where it came from, and unpack those themes that still hit home, even now. Our guide for this deep dive. Excerpts from the Wikipedia article on Lord of the Flies.
What always gets me about Lord of the Flies is how it sticks with you. Long after you've finished it, it makes you think twice about human nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. It gets real about what's lurking inside us all. But just in case it's been a while since anyone's been stranded on this island since, high school English class, let's quickly refresh what goes down.
So picture this. A bunch of British schoolboys, their plane goes down, and they're struck on this island. At first, it's all hope and adventure. They even find a conch, this symbol of order in all the chaos.
Right, the conch. But things go south pretty fast, don't they?
And I'm talking fast. Golding doesn't mess around. He throws these kids into this pressure cooker. Fear, being alone, and this constant sense of the unknown. That's where the whole allegory thing really kicks in. The island becomes a mini-world, showing just how raw humanity can be.
You mentioning allegory, that's interesting. See, when I think Lord of the Flies, I think about how it flips the classic kids' adventure story on its head. You know, the ones where kids face something crazy and come out as heroes.
Totally. And the story behind Lord of the Flies makes that even more wild. Golding got the idea from a children's book, The Coral Island. It was about British boys shipwrecked on an island, but it's all sunshine and rainbows.
Right, they practically build a utopia, like they're playing colonial rulers or something.
Exactly. Golding thought that was a load of you-know-what and decided to write a more, let's say, realistic version. A story that showed how messed up people can be, even kids, when they're left to their own devices. No society to hold them back.
And he went there, into the darkness. I remember that scene where they hunt and kill the pig.
Yeah.
Brutal. It's like this shift from kids playing to something way darker.
That scene, it shows what Golding believed about human nature. He wasn't saying everyone is evil, but underneath it all, there's this instinct, this need for power that takes over when there are no rules.
Like that line, maybe there is a beast. Maybe it's only us. Which, speaking of beasts, Golding knew a little something about that himself.
Oh, yeah. You can't ignore how World War II shaped his writing. He saw the horrors firsthand, the cruelty humans are capable of.
He was even part of the D-Day landings, wasn't he? That's next level.
Commanding a landing craft, he was right in the thick of it.
Right.
Chaos, brutality. It's got to shape how you see the world, how you write a book like Lord of the Flies.
Makes you wonder how those experiences influenced those scenes, those characters. Did he pull from his own memories to create that fear, that tension in the book?
It's something to think about. You know, the first draft of the book, way longer and even more tied to what was going on then. This was 1954, Cold War. The threat of nuclear war was everywhere.
And he almost put a whole section in there about evacuating because of a nuclear war.
He did. Imagine how different the book would have been. It really shows how editorial decisions, what they choose to keep or cut, changes how people see a book. He even took out a scene where Simon kind of talks to God because the publisher asked him to.
Wow. The Lord of the Flies, we know, could have been a whole other thing. Why'd they take those parts out?
Golding agreed in the end, though I've heard he regretted it later. It seems like he wasn't thrilled about changing his vision, but he got why they wanted to. Maybe they thought talking about nuclear war would be too much, too dark, too political for readers back then.
But even without it being right there on the page, the book still gets at that fear that humans could destroy everything.
You got it. And that's why it still means something today. The details might change, nuclear war, climate change, whatever it is. But those big questions, what are people really like? Can we trust ourselves? Can't civilization survive? Those never get old.
And nobody shows that better than Ralph and Jack.
Talk about two sides of the same coin.
Ralph, the leader, holding on to hope, trying to keep everyone in line. And then there's Jack, the hunter, who just wants power. He pulls those boys away from everything they know toward this savagery.
But it's not like it's good versus evil, black and white.
Yeah.
Golding's characters, they're complex, especially for such a short book.
Even Piggy, he seems like the typical voice of reason at first. But as you read, you see how vulnerable he is, picked on not just for being smart, but for how he looks.
Exactly. And that's Golding the teacher coming through. He understood how kids worked, the good and the bad.
It's like he's saying anyone, even the most civilized person, can turn dark, especially when they're afraid.
Makes you think, right? That line between being civilized and, well, going savage, maybe it's not so solid after all.
It makes you wonder, if all the rules disappeared, what would happen to our own sense of right and wrong? Like in the book, they ditch the rules, form their little tribes, and look where it gets them. Not pretty.
And that's why Lord of the Flies still matters. It's like holding up a mirror to ourselves, to that capacity for good and evil inside us. Golding doesn't make it easy, no simple answers. If anything, it's more like, hey, things are complicated, more messed up than we'd like to admit.
Not exactly a light read, but important. It gets you thinking about stuff that's still happening. Leadership, going along with the crowd, people hungry for power, and how fear makes us act.
Exactly. All those big questions. And that's probably why people are still debating what it all means. Some say Golding was too pessimistic, too dark about human nature, while others see it as a warning.
It's almost like the book itself is a microcosm for those debates. Like, we all bring our own baggage to the story and see it through that lens. That's what makes Lord of the Flies so powerful, so timeless.
You said it. Speaking of different ways to see it, it's kind of crazy to think about those edits. Would it have made the same impact if Golding hadn't toned down some of those darker parts? Or the stuff about religion?
Tough to say. Makes you wonder, what if it was published as he first wrote it? Would it be a classic? Would people still be reading it in school, or would it be too much?
Fun to think about. We'll never know for sure, but it shows how an author's vision, what the editors do, all of it, shapes how people see a book. Makes you wonder about other great books, how they end up the way they did.
There's something to be said for a book that stays with you. One that gets under your skin, makes you think. Lord of the Flies is definitely that kind of book.
Oh, for sure. And that's probably why it's still talked about. It's a tough read, but it gets people thinking about important stuff, starts conversations. Sometimes the best books aren't the ones that make you feel good, but the ones that make you face the truth, even if it's ugly.
Totally agree. And Lord of the Flies has definitely earned its place in the Literary Hall of Fame. It's on all those best of lists. Modern Library's 100 Best Novels, BBC's Big Read, even Time Magazine's 100 Best English Language Novels of the 20th Century.
Plus all the adaptations, movies, plays, even a graphic novel. People keep finding ways to tell this story, which tells you something about how powerful it is.
Right. It's bigger than just the book. It's become part of how we see the world. Speaking of which, any interesting adaptations come up in your research?
I saw one, an all-female version. Never got made, but still. It makes you wonder, right? How would that change the story, those themes of power, violence, the whole civilization versus savagery thing, if it was told through a different lens?
Man, that would have been something to see. Shows how flexible Golding's story is, how we can keep finding new ways to tell it, new meanings as the world changes.
Absolutely. The struggle for power, society's falling apart, that good and evil inside us all, those themes never really go away, do they?
Nope. And it's that ability to speak to something deeper, something we all understand, that makes Lord of the Flies more than just some story about boys on an island. It's about being human.
It's wild, right? A book written so long ago that still feels so now. Makes you wonder what Golding would think about everything happening today, the choices we're making.
I bet he'd see those same impulses, the ones he wrote about, still playing out. It'd be familiar, even if the world looks different. But hey, this story's not all doom and gloom. There are moments of, real humanity in there, too.
True. Simon, for example, he's genuinely good, in tune with the island in a way the others aren't. Represents a different way of being.
Exactly. Simon, with his empathy and his connection to nature, he's like the opposite of those power-hungry, scared kids. He's a reminder that even in the chaos, there's still kindness, understanding, a different way to lead.
It's sad, though. The other boys, they don't get him, even fear him sometimes. What happens to him? It's rough.
It is. And it just goes to show how fear, how not understanding can twist things, make us turn on each other. That's not just a Lord of the Flies thing, is it?
Not at all. History's full of it, right?
Yeah.
Scapegoating, demonizing, choosing violence. It's kind of what we do.
And that's when you realize, Lord of the Flies, it's not just about some kids stuck on an island. It's about all of us, about how we choose to deal with fear and uncertainty.
Right. It's like Golding saying, hey, take a look in the mirror. This is what we're capable of, good and bad. We have to own that, choose compassion, choose to think for ourselves, or things fall apart.
Man, that's powerful. Well, we've reached the end of our Lord of the Flies deep dive. We dug into its past, unpacked those heavy themes, and saw how it's still relevant, even a little uncomfortably so.
Fascinating stuff. If people take away one thing, I hope it's that this book, it's more than just a story. It shows us who we are, the potential for both darkness and light inside us all.
And the choice, it's always ours. So to everyone listening, as you deal with life, with the big questions about being human, keep those lessons from Lord of the Flies close. Face your demons, choose kindness and understanding, and never forget what we build together can fall apart way too easily. Until next time, happy reading, and thanks for joining us.